Welcome to Snow Talk, where the Snow and Ice Management Association brings you trends, stories, news, and personalities that are shaping the professional snow and ice management industry. This season of Snow Talk is sponsored by Western, Fisher, and SnowX, so settle in and let's talk snow.
For more than 70 years, Fisher's been building snowplows and spreaders for waymakers, the ones who lead so others can fall in line. The ones who refuse to back down even when the snow is piling up. The ones who make plowing look easy, not because it is, but because they're that good. Forged from steel but made in the New England snow, our roots ground us. They're also what drive us. So to all you waymakers out there, know we're out here too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Snow Talk, the podcast where we cover all things snow business, including marketing, strategy, and scaling snow operations. I'm your host for today's episode, Evan Newman, here at SIMA, and today we have an exciting guest for everyone, Mr. John Crandall. John is the owner and chief visionary of JC Grounds Management in Danvers, Massachusetts, and now he can add one more thing to the resume. He is the author of the new book, Snow Removal Solutions for Property Managers, Making Informed Decisions to Protect Your Property, Satisfy Your Tenants, and Meet Your Budget. And it has caught the eye of the snow industry and those in property and facility management. With decades of experience in the industry and a passion for educating property and facility managers about proper, safe, and efficient snow removal best practices, we're really excited to have John online with us today. And I just finished this book, so I'm very excited to talk about it with him. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. I'm excited to be here. Very excited to have a conversation. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, we're excited to jump into things with John. As many of you know, he's a past board chair of SIMA. So he takes snow seriously and he takes this industry seriously. And really what I've always appreciated about John is his attention to detail around KPI, safety, insurance, and things. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And I hope that those listening on the snow side find a ton of value in how they can educate their clients. And I hope that those on the facility management and property management side find ways that they can better partner with the snow and ice industry. So, John, your book's focused on helping property managers make better snow removal decisions. Why do you think there's such a knowledge gap between those on the contracting side and property management and facility management side?
Good question, Evan. I don't think there's a huge knowledge gap. I think it depends. It's like anything else. It depends on the person and who it is. There's definitely some, like any position, there's some property managers, facility managers, building owners that are kind of new to it, as we all were at one point. And then there's some that are seasoned. And the more seasoned they are, we find that they've had enough, some training, knowledge, whatever, but also just more importantly, experiences through the years that have made them understand snow and ice management and the value to it in a good contractor and everything else more than others. And what this book does is I just noticed that no one's done it. No one in our industry and on the property management side, no one in their industry that I know of has really put anything together that almost like a buyer's guide / just informative book on what is a good snow and ice vendor. What are the challenges and risks if you don't have a good provider, and how do you find one? What does one look like? So it took me a little bit of time to get over the kind of mental head trash of like, am I the guy that should put this together? And literally after a couple of years, I was like, well, no one's done it. I've been in this for 28 years and, I've been on the SIMA board. I've owned some industrial property. So I've kind of have experienced a little bit of both sides.
Sure.
Nowhere near where these professionals, they're controlling hundreds of thousands or millions of square feet. So I don't have anything like that. But I certainly have to vet out vendors and different things for my properties. And then obviously I've maintained snow and ice services for a lot of these large scale properties. So I got over that and put it together. So that's where we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm glad you got over the mental hurdle and kind of got to the point of writing it, because as you mentioned, there's nothing like this that exists as a resource. And you mentioned some of the new property management, facility management professionals maybe working for one of those companies. And I think this would be a great resource for them. What kind of feedback and thoughts have you got on it from that side of the aisle, if you will, for folks not watching, my proverbial that side of the aisle in air quotes there?
Yeah, so I'll share briefly on this because, I could go down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
But, obviously I wanted to put something out that was as good as I could. And so I put my initial thoughts. I actually hired a real editor and and someone that
Yeah.
puts books together, like basically a publicist that puts these things together. They worked with me on how and what you have to do and help with the editing and all that. And then I also and also distribution. Where do you get it out there where it's going to get the most exposure? How is it the easiest for people to obtain it? So they helped with that. And then what I did is I went to some peers in the industry. I went to some property managers that I had known for a while, and I went to some other vendors, and I did an early release of the book to those people, like a rough draft copy, shot that out to like 10 or 12 people that I had a lot of faith in that they would give me good feedback. Like gloves off. Tell me if it's terrible. Tell me if there's, what are the things that they really care about, need to hear about, want to hear about, and does it sound non-biased? I didn't want it to sound like JC Grounds does this, so this is the only right way to do it.
Sure.
That wasn't my intention. So I got some great feedback from those people. Some of them literally went through the whole thing line by line, and I wanted the book to be real. And,
Sure.
So that's, they came back with some great feedback, made multiple modifications. I ended up rewriting the book like 3 times, going through it. I probably read it myself 6 or 7 times, I was surprised at how much goes into it. And this book is only, as you know, Evan, it's just over 100 something pages.
Yeah. 120 pages, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. Whole new respect for authors, because, I did this over a shorter period of time. I wasn't like worried that I didn't want it to be perfect. I just wanted to be real and try to give as much information out in as brief as a period of, as far as a read as I could. And hopefully that's what we accomplished. We'll see.
Yeah, I think so. And I hope so. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, so the only thing I just realized, and this is me, so you're going to have to help control this because I do babble on. I realized I didn't even answer your question. So I've gotten quite a few besides that. Once it was released, I've had way more than expected pictures from either a text on my phone of people that have ordered the book and have read it and give me the thumbs up that they have it. So they'll just take a picture with themselves of the book, and property managers, other peers in the industry, old customers, new customers. I've had a ton of those. And then we've had a few that were nice enough to do it on some social media platforms already. I didn't ask, they just did it. So that was unexpected and kind of cool. So we've gotten some good feedback already.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that you've gotten some good feedback, because as I read through it, I thought to myself, I was telling Amanda here at the Simon offices, I said, let's buy this book for our peer groups. Let's, have a conversation about what this would look like, maybe as even a resource for folks to connect with, because I think it's connect their property management and facility management groups with. I think it's a great way to educate clients. I get asked that question a lot. And while we have a ton of resources, it's sometimes taking time out of it and saying, okay, here's something that's in your hands and a great resource and something that they can take advantage of. And I hope I'm with Simon for a very long time, but I want to add it to like that annual reading list. I've got one other book that I read every year. It's called QBQ, The Question Behind the Question. And it helps me to kind of just refocus my thoughts. It's a short day read just like this one, and it's really thoughtful in that regard. This one kind of helps me reset and have a better appreciation for some of these challenging questions. And you mentioned some of these challenging questions that you had while writing the book. And let's take that through the snow contractor's point of view. There's a lot of science and questions from property managers where there's a lot of trust that then has to be built between these two parties around the science of de-icing and the importance of pre-treatments and the challenges of the storm tracking. You talk about all these factors in your book, but property managers may not see all that goes into it. And then that's where that trust has to be built. So how do you recommend bridging that gap and building that trust?
Yeah, it's something we all probably have to do a little bit different depending on our resources and everything else, from the contractor standpoint. So what we found was the best way to show, and we didn't discover this until probably 6 or 7 years ago. I had a peer group out actually of snow contractors out to my facility, our main facility in Danvers, Mass.
Yeah.
And they came out and they tore it through, and we had just done a remodel and an expansion to the facility. And we had a brine operation. We have all these things going on here without boring you with details. But they walked through, and one of the gentlemen said, he's like, have you ever had a customer come out or, potential customer come out to the facility?
Yeah.
I said, no, we never have. And he said, what are you, crazy? He goes, this is an amazing facility. And this really highlights like what goes in behind the scenes, right? So he had been doing that for years, and it's a longer story. I can't share all the details, but
Sure.
what he was doing was really neat. So we kind of took some of what he was doing and we took that into our facility tour and we built the tour. We said, we're going to stop here, A, B, C, D, E, F stops. We're going to explain this, explain that. And I've been fortunate enough to go out to some other massive other industry, there's different industries, but I visited some industrial facilities and done some tours and seen how like these much bigger companies had done it. I was like, wow, we're going to do the same thing. So long story short, we had, again, I don't want to get into customer names, not just
Sure.
because I don't know if they're okay with it, but we had some major medical facilities from Massachusetts, some major coffee distribution facilities. Some of these people that I wish I could say who they were because they're everyday names, but they came through with some of their leadership team. Okay. And it took them a little bit to get them in. But once we got a few of those big names in, they were amazed by what they saw. And we ended up like doubling, tripling, quadrupling some of those contracts.
Wow.
With those partners. And then what we were able to do is use their name, right, to share like so-and-so came in for a tour and they were really surprised at what they saw, and it educated their leadership team. And now we wish we could do even more, but we bring in several large names a year into our facility. We do these tours and we educate throughout the tour. And it's only like 45 minutes, right? And we try to feed them either breakfast or lunch, and they love it. So that's one way for you to really, if you have that. That's obviously takes a lot of resource and everything else. Otherwise, the best way to do it is to share the different things that are fundamental, like what a best practice, things that you're doing that others aren't, that you can share in story form when you meet them, right? Telling a story is the easiest way. If you can cut the story down to a shortest amount of time as possible and share a story, that really, to me, in my opinion, they remember that story and it goes a long way. So if you don't have the whole facility and everything else, I get that. It took us a long time to get to where we are, but you can tell the story, right? And that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, excellent points, because it's those stories and those visuals, if you're able to combine them, that really go a long way in building that trust. And for folks to understand, I think a lot of these property management companies, these large companies that we're working with, or small companies, a local bank or couple small banks, they don't understand what goes into the plowing and the care of these sites whenever this rapid snowfall starts hitting. I read through your book, that these winters have changed. It's not just the 8-inch fluffy snows that we want to snow contractors. It's the snow, the freeze, refreeze, and thawing
Right.
that happens that makes the jobs harder. So it's those stories, if we can share and articulate with clients, and then have them come see the facility and how much equipment and the breadth of this equipment that you have. I'm sure that it's a magnificent way to really illustrate how massive of an operation it takes to truly be in line and in tune with their needs and with keeping them safe and out of harm's way. And when I say harm's way, I mean litigation, the elephant in the room, and where that comes from. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, there's no secret to this, secret sauce here, but our tour generally starts in our conference room and we go through these different segments, right? But yeah, of course, the equipment and the infrastructure is important because they see that. But beyond that, like it's the people that are here, the talent will show some of that, because the back end support is just as important as the actual execution out in the field. Getting billing out in a timely manner, backing up the billing with the right weather data, showing all of that. And then the explanation of really, I think the key thing is the difference between a reactive versus a proactive approach to snow removal. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think our industry has shifted so much in the last decade or couple decades. When I first started, I mean, I'm aging myself a little bit here, but I was 16, right? Yeah. And it was just get the snow out of the way, put sand and salt down at the end of the storm, make sure you do the best you can, and we're done, Get as many spots open as you can. It's shifted a lot, as you mentioned, to liability and risk and really tolerance for having even an inch of icy snow or anything on the ground is gone in a lot of these places. And so we need to be proactive. Here's what's funny about this. And this is the thing when you mentioned about sharing with what's the big difference? One of the things I see is a big difference between the contractor and the property manager. Mm-hmm. If there's a budget that comes to mind. And what I mean by this is, obviously we know we need to stay within some kind of budget, but I think it's the same, and I don't want to get into politics, but I'll say I think it's similar to what's going on in the healthcare industry right now. If you go into the hospital, whatever insurance you have or, resources you have personally, you would hope that it's not going to determine your outcome of your care, right? We would hope that's not going to happen. Like I go in and hopefully whatever is wrong with me, they can fix and do everything in their power to do it. The reality is that's not, unfortunately it's not what's going on completely behind the scenes in the medical side, which is terrible, right? And it's a fundamental problem there. We don't know how to fix that. We're not on this podcast to do that, but it's similar to snow in that it sounds almost crazy, right? Like picture this. You're in front of an office building, right? And I'm the snow contractor and I'm outside. Now this would never happen, but I'm standing outside with the property manager or the owner of the building. And the parking lot is covered with liquid, whether it be ice, water, let's just say it's water, right? Ground temperatures hovering at 34, air temperatures hovering at 34. It's 4 a.m. Now, the coldest point of the night, if you don't know this, most property managers don't know, is between 6 and 7 a.m. Okay?
Okay.
So, and if you lose cloud cover, that's like taking the blanket off. Cloud cover goes away, all of a sudden the temperature drops further. Okay, so simple meteorologic stuff. So, you're standing out there at 4 a.m. Let's say it's 6 a.m. Now we're at 33 in the ground temp, 33 in the air, and you're starting to see your tenants, right? Your customers pull into the parking lot. And I'm there. I got the salt truck right next to me, the spreader. And we're both standing there, me and the property manager. And the property manager, I'm watching someone get out of the car, and the property manager's looking at me and he's going, "Hey, John, let's wait and see how they do getting across the lot. If they slip and fall on their butt, you should get in the truck and salt it."
Right.
It's crazy, right? You laugh at it, but that's what used to happen. That was a reactive approach. It was like, hey, look, when someone falls or when it gets icy, come out and salt.
Yep.
No, of course not. You got to use the science you have. You got to use, whatever data we have. We've got a pretty neat system where we can see ground temperatures, we can see air temperatures, ambient and ground, see where they're going. We know at a certain point in the night, it's going to be a downward trajectory. So if we hit like 34 degrees on either of those temps, like we're looking for that and going, hey, we got to pull the trigger to get it all out, call out. Everyone's going to go, right? We got to go proactively apply material because we know it's very likely we're going to hit that 32 degree mark and it's going to freeze. Now, someone asked me once before, I was in a meeting with this big team of this large medical facility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this before in other interviews. This is a real story. I'm in there and I'm talking to the guy and he's like, listen, of course we have a budget, but John, I want you to treat this place. It's all hills, which is bizarre. Almost every hospital we take care of is all hills, which is crazy, but that's reality.
Yeah. Most of them are, you would think the safest point would be flat, but regardless. Yeah.
Right? Hey, that's the ground we have to deal with here in New England. So it's all hills. So he said, John, I want you to take care of this place like it's your father, your kid, your wife, your brother, your sister coming up that hill in the ambulance in seconds count, right? Mm-hmm. So when he said that, I almost like started to tear up. I was like, I'm a big guy and everything else. I'm like, Jesus, make me a little. But I'm like, you're right. If we don't take care of that proactively, that thing ices up right in the time period that ambulance is going up the road. And the ambulance gets stuck in the hill for 5 minutes, 2 minutes even. It could be life or death. Right? So that's how important this stuff is. It's life or death if that ambulance can't get in there when it needs to, right? Yeah. And if my kid's in that ambulance, you bet your butt it better be good, right? So I need to think like it's my kid whenever we're treating those types of places. But I'm also thinking about the poor person, whether it's an employee or a customer, whoever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a cleaner coming in to take care of the office on a Sunday. They shouldn't be walking across a lot iced over. Right? Mm-hmm. So we have to be proactive because if that person falls and breaks a leg or something, somebody could have a massive, massive injury. So that's what we're doing the best we can to use the science to do that. But we also don't want to be the other side of the shoulder is you don't want to be putting de-icer down when it's 36 degrees and it's not going to freeze.
Right.
So you have to use as much of the science as you can to make the best decision. But we're trying to do that, so weighing both sides. We're always thinking of the budget, but we're also, at the end of the day, I tell our team here, I'm like, you've got to use your discretion, but we want to lean to the side of caution, right? I don't want someone to fall and get hurt and it to be on my shoulder. I'd rather argue about why we did it in the bill than argue about why someone is, had a life-threatening injury.
Yeah, really strong points, and really, as you mentioned, proactive rather than that reactive. And that's, that mentality has helped you. And again, something, as I read through your book, you have helped a lot of your clients, customers, and those companies you're working with, and even potential customers, I would venture to say, to shift that conversation from price to value. And I think that that's a hard thing that we're kind of working through in the industry right now, is working through that struggle with clients who just want the cheapest option. So
Right.
you laid out a ton of good examples, but when's the time to walk away, or what, I guess, silver bullet at times have you found to really jump over that hurdle with folks who are just looking at the cheapest option?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the contractor to figure that out. We do our best to share what I just shared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And explain everything. And not to mention the fact that, there's also the side of, if you do have an employee that gets hurt, if you have a customer that gets hurt, right? Not only the medical costs, the lawsuit, all of that, but what's the value of that person's time being out of work? Right. So there's so much there that compounds to a much higher expense if someone gets hurt. And most slip and falls actually occur in under an inch of snowfall. That's a proven fact. Right. So we try to share all of that as best we can. In the end of the day, if people are like, listen, it doesn't matter. We just need to get the snow cleared, do the best you can. We have minimal traffic, whatever reason that they're putting out there. If it's just not a fit for us, it's just not a fit. We have a fundamental difference in the way we would go about things, and we're just not a fit. So we end up not working out. They'll likely find another contractor that they're okay with that. They're okay with just doing bare bones. I don't want to label anything, but
Sure.
likely it is going to be someone that's just doing snow on the side. They're filling the gap for the winter. They're not even thinking about all these risks and stuff. And they're going to fill that gap for the customer that wants that type of service. I don't think it's right for anyone. Because again, I just think of it as again, going back to that meeting with the medical professionals, what if it was I don't care if it's a small strip mall, what if it was my grandmother walking across her parking lot and she fell and got hurt? I'd be pretty upset.
Right. Absolutely. I think that you bring up some really good points about educating on the pain points, educating on the proactivity, and educating on, the science and the statistics. That's something you walk through in your book, is saying, okay, well, has this competitor that's, going out to bid with you, have they showed you all these different pieces of the puzzle that come into play? One of the stories I really liked from reading the book is that you focused on a chain store or a facility that you serviced. Can't remember what it is now, but then what kept standing out to me was the movie theater that was right next door. You talked about it, and are like, hey, this movie theater came in, and every year they'd call us and say, okay, we need your help now, even though the storm's already there, and even though that they're using someone that's not potentially qualified. Again, not to put anybody into a bucket, but that that they weren't getting the job done, didn't have the equipment, is what it really came down to get the job done. So I think it's about educating on that front too, and that's where that facility tour really comes into play, showing that equipment, showing those people, showing that data, and getting them to realize those pieces of the puzzle that sometimes are unseen factors in your operation. Because I know people listening either have invested or are trying to get to that point of investing in those pieces. So it's not a matter of putting anyone into a box.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the story you mentioned, actually, one of the people we had sent the book out to came back to us, and we sent it to property managers as well. Like I said, one of them came back and they said it kind of sounded like you were saying, look at how great I am. We're not going to help you. We've got all this equipment next door and you don't. And that we're beating up the small contractor that was next door. And I did not want it to sound like that, because that's not at all what I was describing. I won't get into it, but it was a national cinema chain and it was a national aggregator taking care of it. And the national aggregator had selected what I think was a very young, very new plow guy every year. It was a different person. And that person, I almost think, just didn't know what they're getting into on a small, like you said earlier, a fluffy storm, 1 to 3 inches, maybe 3 to 6 inches. You're probably fine with a much much or, reduced amount of equipment that was over there. But anytime they got a big snow, they would get in trouble. And I just said, I'm not going to help this because it's going on year after year after year. So I don't want to it wouldn't matter if they had told me they're going to pay me 3 times what it should be. I don't want to continue, help continue this problem, right? To me, it's like there's multiple things here. The cinema's probably not paying enough, and the aggregators almost going after these people that don't know enough to put the right thing, and they're probably not paying them enough. And I'm like, I'm not going to help continue that. It's not okay for anyone. It doesn't help the guy that's out there plowing. It doesn't help the movie theater. So we're not going to do it. So that's where we are.
Yeah, and it doesn't help lift up the industry and set those best practices and standards. And then in those best practices and standards that, we need to be working towards and abiding by, those are pieces that then we can use to facilitate a more meaningful conversation with a property or facility management company to say, hey, these are the best practices. These are the ways that we get better and get more tactical and ensure that, again, you brought this up multiple times in the book. We bring this up all the time at SIMA. Make sure you're protected as the contractor out on these jobs. So what are the 5 key strategies that you've heard feedback on, or 3 even, that top 3 to 5 list, if you will, Letterman style, that have been most impactful to the snow contractors that read this book or the property management companies that read this book? And I'm sure they're maybe a little different, but I would say they should align more often than not.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one. This is probably obvious, right? But definitely doing a really good check on the contractor, reference check. Have they worked for a similar size facility or property?
Mm-hmm.
What's their record? Have they always shown up on time, done the right thing? If they cleared on time, if they're giving you good backup support, everything else. So, you think that's pretty obvious, but I would definitely do that, be checking in on whoever it is that you iron. But then outside of that, it's, how far away are they? Do they have any resources, facility? Even if I started with 1 truck out of my childhood home. So I actually started with a commercial property, but I was like literally 5 minutes down the road. My rule of thumb is like, we try to stay 15 to 30 minutes tops from a branch. We use that with traffic, with snow. That's what we want to be, because we want to have ability to get more material if we need it. Our fleet team to be able to assist if we need backup, all those things come into play. So how far away are their resources? And then I'd say, what are their resources? What kind of team do they have? What kind of equipment do they have? And it's all in my mind, everything in this business is around redundancy and information, right? You need the information to make the right decision, and you need redundancy in the event that you have a failure with the equipment, a failure with the people. The storm is 3 times bigger than you thought it was going to be. You just need the redundancy. You need to be able to repair your equipment in the middle of the night when no one is open. So just what do they have there for that backup support? So those are a few things. Then you get into insurance and everything else. But I would say the most important thing is vetting them out, making sure that they've got some history there.
Right, exactly. And I think those are really good points. And I guess buy the book to learn more, read those 120 pages or whatever the total page count is to learn a little bit more. And then this isn't a sales pitch. I just truly found it to be valuable. And I guess the big piece that I wanted to spend a little bit of time here in our last 15 minutes or so together is one thing you talked about in the book that was really profound, I guess, maybe not the right word, but really stood out to me as a new father myself and finding ways to find efficiencies. You mentioned this big storm hits the Boston area. You're working for, I can't recall exactly, 3 to 4 weeks straight. Your wife had just had twins. What a beautiful blessing that it is. But, you said, hey, I didn't have the processes in place. And I think one thing that we often take for granted is that no matter what size of company you are, you can have the right processes and you can have the right systems in place. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you start to identify those as a, small to mid-sized company, and how have those then transformed and grown throughout that time as you guys have continued to evolve and develop over at JC Grounds?
So without trying to sound too much like a consultant, Evan,
sure, that's fair.
Nothing wrong with that. It's not who I am right now, I don't think. But one of the things I'll say that I found, it really opened my mind up, is someone was telling me once, it was, whether it was in a book, whatever, I don't know who to give it credit to, but it didn't come from me. Was what they said was, if you're trying to break through a ceiling or a barrier, right? if you set your goal just a little bit higher, so let's say I'll do simple with sales because everyone talks about sales. Let's say you're trying to increase your sales by like 5%, right? What happens when you tell yourself and your team you want to increase sales by 5 or 10% is you generally do the same thing you already did. You just work a little bit harder. Okay. Now, if somebody said to me, John, we want you to increase your sales by 100% or, double or whatever, 50%, right? Whatever it was last year, you can't just work harder. You have to change things completely. You have to go through, a mindset shift. You have to completely use a different strategy because you can't just work twice, double. So what happened to us in 2015 in Boston was we had essentially around 110 inches of snowfall in like a 6-week period, which was more than double our normal snowfall in a whole winter in 6 weeks, right? So we were able to change quick enough that our customers, we actually had almost 100% renewal the next year, but it wasn't without me aging 5 years. And like you said, we had twins in the middle of it, and I could only spend like 12 hours before I had to get back out managing the teams. And I was like, I can't sustain this again. Like I was on adrenaline for like 6 weeks. I've never done any recreational drugs. So I had other than coffee, I had nothing that was fueling this, right? Other than it was pure adrenaline. So yeah, we had to completely shift our way of doing things in order to sustain it in the future. Because it was either I just give the business up and say, I'm done. I can't do this again. Or I do love what I do. So I love what I do. What do we have to do differently? So that's just giving you have to think completely different. So we did a number of things in order to sustain growth for a winter like that again to occur that gave us a ton of runway. And we actually just came out of that again about 2 years ago. We hit a ceiling again. We're like, geez, we're maxed out.
Okay.
And we had to retool again. And this year was we had a big spike year again in growth. And we think what's really neat is we look at everything. We look at like our people and where their minds are, and all that. And we think we can actually absorb another massive growth for like a few more years before we have to retool it all again. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, that's powerful. Again, I know you're not trying to be a consultant, but you'll probably get some more calls as people pick up your book and, things. And I know you're willing for those things to happen because you wouldn't have wrote the book and you wouldn't be as involved and be willing to pour into others as you are. But the two things that stand out to me there that we can take just a few moments to elaborate on more is sustainability, is this, idea of, you mentioned it in this read, is that, watching small snow business, watching mid-sized, large businesses even, regardless of size, we've watched plenty come and go in the marketplace over the last, 15, 20 years. That's a reality. And I think it will continue to be, unfortunately, through mergers and acquisitions and retirements and just the aging of our community. So how, someone listening to this that's a young, mid-career journey, how do you create? It's about sustainability. It's about finding ways to continue to be in this business and continue to watch out for your own personal, mental, physical health. So that's that's very important. And in the second piece of that you mentioned was there at the end is retooling. I mean, I think about, the best of the best in business, and I'm taking snow completely out of it, looking at other industries. You look at the Phil Knights with Nike, you look at Steve Jobs with Apple and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. Those folks have retooled their mission, their vision, their brand over time. Maybe not their mission as much. Their mission stays the same, but their vision, their brand, those KPIs to continue to work towards. And I think that's, we look at snow or landscaping and think, we don't need to do that. The job, it's A to B, it's simple. But as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, these things are changing. We went from just plowing snow to now working through these extreme conditions and against extreme competition. And I don't even mean your competition down the street. I'm talking extreme competition with legal firms and insurance and different things that are impacting our industry at a head where, it's tools like this to retool and identify the next step. So I just want to unpack all that. It could be a whole separate podcast, but I just want to say thanks for really diving into there. And I wanted to just say, I think those are super important based on not only what you've said, what I've read in your book, but also what I'm hearing from our members. So
100%. One last thing I'll share is you can Google it, check it out. There's something called Net Promoter Score. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some, Evan, not sure if you are, but
Yeah.
basically it's only 2 questions that we ask our customers. This is where a lot of the content in the book came from. This was
Okay.
0 to 10. How likely would you refer us to a peer? Right. And then the follow-up question is, they tell you where they are. The follow-up question is, why did you rate us the way you did? And that's where we were able to build what is it our customers want? What do they need? What do they want? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we add to the whole program? And we started actually doing the NPS, Net Promoter Score, with our full-time employees here. And we're doing it now this year for the first time with our partners. So like some of the subcontractors, some of the vendors, for the same reason. We want everyone to like, where are you? Like, we don't want you to not like working where you are, not like supplying for us. So those are important. And then Mike Rory, actually, who's one of my friends, and he's someone I look up to. He mentioned to me once, we were talking about the life balance that you were referring to.
Uh-huh.
And I hope Mike's okay with me saying this, but he goes, what I do is I check. I love Mike because he's so frank and like direct. He goes, I just check in with my wife, and I can't remember. I'm not going to quote this perfectly. So sorry, Mike, but he goes, I check in with my wife once a year. I say, are you pissed off? Are everything okay? Are you happy still? And she gives me the thumbs up, and I'm like, great. Or, thumbs down. I need to work on some things, and Mike's great because he's always like, he just gives you that quick, that's in 99% of what he says is gold. So I love him. But so and that's it's as simple as that with my kids. Am I doing the right thing? This is my first go around with kids. So
Yeah.
what can I do to be a better dad, and what can I do to be a better husband? And then obviously check in with yourself. Do I feel refreshed at the end of the day? It's never going to be perfect. I'm going to work a ton of hours some weeks, and you take some time at other sides.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate all those. Those are great takeaways to kind of wrap things up here today. And I think that you mentioned the Net Promoter Score. And I think if that's your only takeaway from today, if you've listened to this whole podcast and you're thinking, okay, because actually Jeremy Darling, who works on your team, he had mentioned that at one of our peer group meetings last year when we had all got together in person. Somebody had asked about surveys, and he was like, hey, talk to John about it, talk to our team about it, stop doing these massive surveys, do 2 questions, and then, dial into it from there. And it's really stuck with me. And I'd heard of Net Promoter Score, and we've used it in different associations here and other places I've worked to just get better. And, but I'd always been like, okay, 3 to 5 questions, dialing it back to 2. You're really lean, but being lean is good. So.
And Evan, one of the things, so we share all those comments with our team, good or bad. We share them when they come in to the team. If they are anything under, like an 8, we'll share with the team, hey, we need a response to this. We need to follow up with this customer. And the good we share too, because obviously the good's just as important or more important. You got to share that to give the team a high five. So, all good.
Right. That's awesome. Well, John, how can folks learn more about you? What's the best way to reach out to you? What's the best way to find your book? I know you're working on getting it into an audio format as well, which is typically how I prefer. So this was the first book since like January I'd picked up. So I appreciate that, just because I'm a typical millennial, I guess, and just listen to a ton of podcasts. I'm always on the move. But, anyway, what's the best way to learn a little bit more about the book, learn about you, and connect with you if people have questions?
Book's easy. It's on Amazon. I think it's $15 price point. Just so everyone knows, none of this goes to line in my pockets. We're donating all the proceeds to cancer research.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yep. Everything goes to that. Obviously, there's a cost to print it and everything else that'll be paid through those proceeds. And then the rest, everything that's left over goes to that. And then on the other side, the Audible you mentioned, we did just finish that. So that should be out in the next week or 2. And I'm not sure what the platform's going to look like. I think it might be on Audible, but we do have that version coming out in about 2 weeks. So that's it. It's pretty easy. And as far as me, I tell everyone the same thing. I'm not a consultant. I'm not paid for that, but I am very open. You can find us online. It's for just the company. Look us up. Our phone number's online, jcgrounds.com. There's a little tab for the book on there, but I'm a pretty open person. So if you call in our office and you say you're from the industry and you want to chat, I might not be able to chat right then, but I will set a time and we'll follow up with you. So I'll share whatever I can.
That's awesome. And we appreciate that. And I think that's one of the coolest things about our industry that I've found is that there's always competition. People are leery of that. I get it, but folks are usually pretty willing to share. I presume we'll see at the symposium. So if you don't feel comfortable doing, the phone call and finding John there, please feel free to reach out and find him at the symposium. He's not a hard guy to find. I always see him walking around, smile on your face and just, ready to engage with a peer. So I appreciate that about you and about all of our members for that matter.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Evan. I will be there. I'll also be at the Leadership Forum. They're both awesome venues. If you haven't been to one, get to one of them because the best thing you get is that's where I've learned the most is just talking to peers. So come on out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, John, for giving up some of your time to spend with us this morning. And thanks to everyone for listening. If you've got value out of today's podcast, I hope and ask that you'll subscribe or leave a review or simply just share with a friend. Send it to them and say, hey, I got some value out of this. I hope you will too. And that personal connection's huge in our industry. And again, it goes back to that work-life balance, that friendship is medicine. So we'll catch you next time here on Simon Snow Talk. Thanks again to our education team for making it all possible and to our sponsors over at Western Fisher and SnowX. So thank you all for listening. And thanks again, John.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Snow Talk, sponsored by Western, Fisher, and SnowX. Check out all of our episodes at sima.org/podcast.